Hello and welcome to this virtual panel discussion from Foodservice Consultants Society International, FCSI. We will be discussing the topic of designing for modern food service with functional furniture. I'm Tina Nielsen from Progressive Content and I'm the editor of FCSI's Foodservice Consultant magazine. This session is supported by Spring USA and I'm happy to be joined by a hugely experienced panel who will share their thoughts and insight on this topic. I'd now like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their areas of expertise and experience. Linda, can we start with you, please?
Sure. I'm Linda Callahan. I work for Next Step Design. We're a food service consultant. We have offices all across the country, but our home office is based out of Annapolis, Maryland, which is where I am. We work in all facets of the hospitality, B&I, senior living. We've really expanded all of our sectors. So very excited to be a part of the panel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Linda. And Chris?
Good morning. Chris Bigelow, president of the Bigelow Companies, and we're consultants. Unlike Next Step, we have a very narrow focus in that sports and entertainment venues throughout the world, primarily in North America, though, is the bulk of our work. Stadiums, arenas, convention centers, performing arts centers, all focused on the food and beverage aspect of those venues. Okay, fantastic. And Dean?
Yeah, I'm Dean Thompson. I'm with Concord Hospitality. We have 144 hotels in North America and into Canada. We represent all the major hotel brands, and we have 27 different brands within those umbrellas. I've been with them now for 13 years. So we're based out of Raleigh, North Carolina.
Fantastic. And finally, Nick.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Lekos, Global Director of Sales for Spring USA. I've been with the company for the last 17 years. I've traveled all over the world, seen our technology from the Middle East to Southeast Asia to Brazil. And really happy to be part of the panel. And I personally want to thank Christine and Linda for being here.
So if we start off looking at the topic of induction, Nick, if we can stay with you, what are you seeing as the next trend of induction technology?
Yeah, just to recenter ourselves, 17 years ago when I joined, induction was all about high heat and quick heat. How can we heat something efficient, safe, quickly? And there's been a continuing trend for lower wattage, thinner induction ranges, concealed induction ranges, smaller induction ranges, and reconfigurable induction ranges. So we're seeing it to be smaller, thinner, even as small as there's a new induction dot that's 9 inches. There's a trend for not overloading power grid and for its effects to be available, but not seen.
And Linda, from a consultant perspective, what are you seeing?
Induction is definitely a route that we're going, especially in the not only the back of house, when you talk about a little more industrial and better way for those high wattage cooking, but especially in the front of the house after COVID and some of the buffets have taken a little bit of a hit, but with flexible sneeze guards options, mobile units, things like that, having that induction flexibility from being able to have an FF&E piece that can be hidden and have multi-use to have these flexible areas, we've seen a huge increase in using induction in those facets.
And Dean, why did you adopt induction technology within Concord? What are the biggest advantages as you see it?
Yeah, from an operations guy, for me, it's about the cost. It gets kind of silly on the, people using those sternos and seeing those flames. It's visually appealing. It allows some versatility when it comes to how you want to do your setup, and it's clean and sanitary. So it kind of makes sense within our operations to go in that direction. It's been beneficial from a cost perspective, which is, what all owners want to hear.
And how long have you been implementing it?
Well, 13 years ago is when I remember first using, Spring USA products. It's amazing how they've advanced from how much power they pull to where they are now. When they first came around, they would pull a ton of power. And now you can get several units into one outlet.
And Chris, from your corner of the food service segment, what applications have you used induction in?
Yeah, it really started, and Dean mentioned, the sterno days. I think we all grew up in the business with sterno, and due to fire issues and code issues and everything else. The primary area where the induction started in our industry is in the suites, the private boxes, and which typically would have 3 or 4 buffet items, heated items that needed to be maintained, but you had the customer. Often it was self-service. So, one of the concerns was always whether it was a electric hot plate or sterno or whatever, is if you didn't have an attendant working it, what was going to happen? So when the concept of the induction came around, it solved a lot of those problems, besides looking better. But it also was much easier and I guess more intuitive for the customer to be able to control it and still serve hot food hot. So that was the first application, was in suites. It's now expanded more so into clubs and other private areas, and even into the concession area, depending on the menu. But suites still are the bulk of the use of the product.
How big is the demand for flexibility in this equipment? And is it bigger now than it was, say, before COVID?
I will say that, for example, in the FF&E part of these operations, so a lot of these owners are spending money in the fixtures and the furnishings, and they're saying, how can we upgrade this equipment to offer a food service solution? They're placing a communal table in one of their brands or their operations. How do we upgrade that to offer some sort of flexibility of the space? One of the things that have been paramount, I've been hearing from the brands, is we don't want to lose the seats in the restaurant space. We need that. And we also, when there's a large amount of people, there's no better way to service them than through a buffet. But when it cuts down and they either want to go to an a la carte or adapt into something else, they don't want this, to Chris's point, fire out there in these food coffins. Basically, they want something streamlined. So there's been a trend in this furniture that's being designed by interior designers in collaboration with the food service consultants to say what makes sense. And the efficiency of it, of low power, it burns 3 cents per kilowatt hour, 3 cents versus $1.80 canned fuel. It's very efficient, but then once again, when it's not in use, it looks like a table that you could use your laptop on. So there's a lot of flexibility. Really looking forward to hearing from Dean, Linda, and everyone else on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, for us, in building hotels, we have a lot of cases. We need to transition a space from being a breakfast restaurant, essentially, that's got a buffet, into a rooftop bar. It still has that, that feel of just being a piece of furniture, essentially, kind of like Nick was saying. And so that transition it's a drastic transition from a breakfast area to a rooftop lounge that it makes very easy. And along with all the storage that you don't need for all the other equipment that you might typically have in breakfast buffet situation.
I would agree with Dean. Like we're seeing all the same things in a lot of different hotel designs, and be able to have those flex stations that can go from morning to midday to night, and induction and these, more concealed FF&E pieces have been a great way to transition that. The other thing that we're seeing is the need for that flexibility of having the induction and the buffets that can go from self-service to full service. So if they're mobile or if they're permanent and they're pulled away from the wall, you can have support items from beneath and behind, so that you're refilling from behind instead of walking in front and disrupting a customer or a guest that may be trying to access it. And then incorporating sneeze guards with that meet all the NSF standards, that can either be up for down for full service or up for self-service buffet style.
How about you, Chris? What do you see in terms of flexibility?
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with all the comments. That, one thing that has been great has been, and I know Nick has spent a lot of time working with interior designers, with the architects too, is to really get them involved. I mean, they hate standard stainless steel food service equipment that is functional, but may not be the greatest looking stuff. So the fact that they can come in and really get the look that they're looking for, whether it's operating as food service, or as everybody mentioned, there's a lot of times that these spaces don't have food service in it. And so it really has been a win-win to keep the architects happy as well, that it does look like a piece of furniture that belongs in that space, even when it's not serving food.
Nick, the functional furniture for food service, how are you seeing it being adopted the most?
Yeah, I think in a variety of ways, more so with the communal table solution continues, but also in renovation, some of the franchise groups are looking for, they'll have a 50-foot space and say, we want a quick lead time, we want to watch on costs, we don't want on-site install teams. What sort of solution do you have? So this semi-stationary furniture where they're mobile, but they look very stationary, can be made fairly quickly, shipped on site, uncrated, pushed into the place, plugged in and played. It was a Miami Hilton. They had this very old buffet style where they demoed within a few days, and then these 8 tables arrived to execute the solution they needed for that space. The same goes for stadium clubs. They have these stationary built-in old tables, and they're saying, hey, we'll demo this in a couple of days. Can you help us provide cooking stations, pizza stations, all these various stations to execute, say, a 700-person club, a 300-person club, where these mobile applications, all depending on square footage, power availability, and the menu that's designed by the operator, that's when the solution can be created. Sticking
with the stadiums, Chris, what benefits do you see from using the functional furniture?
Again, it's interesting because most people think of stadiums as that's where I'm going to go to a football game, whether it's football or soccer, or a baseball game. But today, the economics are everybody is building sports venues to be operated 365 days a year. For example, in an arena, we have concerts all the time, and in some concerts, it's a kids concert or young adults, let's put it that way. And that menu is totally different than, a country band that's there. And basically, if you can sell beer, you're doing okay, because that's all they're going to drink anyway. So you have to adapt for every type of event. And then you have to adapt for what we call non-events, which is non-ticketed events. And the most functional banquet space or meeting space is one with no furniture at all in it. So the more fixed items you have in there, even bars. We've got a lot of places that, if we know we're not going to use it primarily as a bar area, the bar can be portable along with the food that goes with it. So certain days that room is empty and you can set it up as a normal banquet space with a stage in the front for a speaker. So the idea of portability is huge.
And Dean, you touched on it a little bit earlier about how you can have a bar in the evening in the same space where you serve the breakfast. Are there any other ways, any other examples you can give of how functional food service furniture can help you?
It's kind of what Chris just mentioned. It allows us to customize events and space for those events. Whether it's in the hotel industry, whether it's social or group business, activating spaces that aren't typically utilized maybe for food service, but it gives us the opportunity to sell it as serviceable square footage, essentially. So we can activate areas like pools or whatever it may be and turn them into something new and exciting and different to kind of separate us from our competition.
And Linda, from the consultant's point of view, when you advise clients, what are the most important features that you mention when you advise your clients on a design or project?
Well, depending on the client, a lot of different things that go into the thought of what kind of piece of equipment or what we're going to specify. It varies from code jurisdictions, the type of operation, the flow of the space, what kind of flexibility. We touched a little bit about the buffet option and the self-serve option and having that flexibility, but a lot of clients also use some of these flexible stations for pop-ups. go with a higher wattage, some of the downdraft systems that can be incorporated that meet different jurisdictions for actual remote cooking stations that are mobile, that can be moved over and be flexible. So a lot of the conversation goes with the client about, what their goals are for their space, what equipment is going to meet their needs best, how their staff's going to maintain the equipment, and really just the application that they're looking for. So it can be anywhere from that holding range and buffet service to actual action cooking stations.
How do you feel mobile food service can elevate the guest experience?
It adds a touch of class, I think, to any event. The flow of traffic, it kind of breaks up a buffet where you get that line that everybody's stood in at a wedding and waited for 20 minutes to try to go through. When you're designing an event, to be able to put different stations out there and kind of break up the room, you get a much better flow. For me, as far as the action stations go, I feel like they've always allowed us to control the amount of product that we use as well. A lot better, because oftentimes you end up either plating or serving things individually to your guests rather than them scooping and serving themselves. That's always been an advantage. We can kind of control our food costs.
And going back to you, Linda, we spoke a little bit about it before with including mobile elements in the design. How do you incorporate those mobile elements into a standard design space?
I think one of the things we like to do are different space planning exercise where, we are planning out depending on if it's going to be banquet operations or if it's going to be hotel buffet operations. And we space plan those areas to make sure we have the right clearance, what the flow of travel might be through that space during different setups for different times of the day. And then a lot of times really, when we use elements like Spring, we work with Nick to figure out the space requirements that we need to program out. If we need to have 3 inductions and a cold or a cooking station with a downdraft, how much space do we need? And then plan that into that area to make sure we're getting the correct amount of circulation and we're not creating any bottlenecks.
And Nick, moving over to your perspective, what mobile elements are you seeing being embraced most with the brands that you work with today?
I just want to echo what everyone said. It really is the activation depending on the space. So cooking and also these pods within the banquet environment, they want to lay out the space to have efficient flow of individuals, but also activating that station with a theme, whether it be a pasta station. We're seeing like donut stations. We're seeing various drink stations, beverage stations, coffee stations. I've been challenged by some major brands recently to say, what's the future of buffets look like? And these carts or stations come into play. But I would say adaptive carts, something that really catches the ear of the owner, is say, where's the value points on this cart? Can we use it? What else can we use it by besides this particular theme? So we've been challenged how we could adapt certain carts to cook, hold, ambient, carving. So how can we create an investment that makes sense for all parties? But then that downdraft filtration system Linda spoke about, site-specific approval in Manhattan for that, because in this post-COVID world, an air filter that can grab odor, particulates, and any grease-laden vapor creates a clean air environment for the guest to approach and have a good experience. It's all about the fan experience in the stadium and arena. It's all about the guest experience walking through a hotel, casino, or any other operation. So I think this all really adds to the experience of the guest.
And I suspect, Chris, in stadiums and arenas, it's all about the themed cards, isn't it?
Yeah, we can't control the play on the field, is what the owners love to say, and certainly the Chiefs are saying that right now. But I think it goes back to an old term that we've all used and maybe don't use it anymore, but action stations. I mean, at the end of the day, the customer reacts if they see a stationary buffet that they go up and pick their food out of that versus a chef attended area that they're grilling or frying, whatever it may be, breakfast in the morning, cheesesteaks at lunchtime, desserts, as Nick mentioned. That adds a whole new dimension of it's fresh, it's hot, and it's part of the show. And so the idea that we can wheel this in and do that, and then maybe it gets wheeled out and it's goes to a different room or a different suite or whatever, is very popular, and the customer wants it. I mean, in our business, the reason somebody buys a ticket is not for the food, it's for the event. But if you look at the fan surveys afterwards, they probably will have more comments about the food than they will about the play on the pitch or the field or the ice or wherever. And so it is all part of that show.
So the mobile element is hugely important in terms of the cooking and warming for stadiums.
Absolutely. Because again, I mean, the worst example, I guess, would be college football. There's 6 events in 100,000 seat stadium. So those spaces, many cases, do sit empty, but athletic departments now are saying, what else can we put in there? What other, whether it's a stadium concert or a festival, what else can we do? And the food's got to adapt to the crowd that's there. So the more mobile it is, the better off you are.
Right. So we've talked so much about the buffet generally since COVID hit last year. I mean, I've spoken to so many people who said this is the end of the buffet. Other people are saying, no, it's coming back. It's just changing. So I'd like to hear your views on that. I mean, Linda, how do you think operators can best plan their food service operations for the future, now knowing that we might get another pandemic? It's happened once. It could happen again.
And I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, just with being the key word being flexibility. So I think it all depends on reading your guests, reading your clientele, what they are comfortable with, the feedback that they're giving you. Like Chris said, whatever that feedback is, if they are comfortable in a buffet setting, or if having that chef serve the full sneeze guard protection to where it's plated by somebody that's wearing a mask. And I think that having those mobile stations that can be moved away from the wall so that somebody can go behind them, and having the sneeze guards in the correct location so that they give protection, that flexibility has really been key. And it's what we've been seeing be very successful for a lot of our clients, because it's not locking them into having something that is stationary against a wall. There's no way for somebody to get behind it, and eliminates that, what we saw everybody kind of scramble and do these awkward, somebody standing in front of it and then walking in front of you and loading your plate versus you doing it. That mobility really gives the chance to get your 3'6" away from the wall so somebody can stand behind it and serve.
So Dean, how are Concord hotels approaching the buffet dining now and looking ahead as well?
Well, a lot of hotel brands out there, even pre-COVID, wanted to elevate their buffet looks and going to individual serving pieces, whether it was a regular buffet or a breakout, midday or coffee break, whatever it may be. They wanted to kind of, like I said, elevate it. It's kind of the Disney World type of buffet where you see everything in small individual serving pieces. So we've just kind of, tried to carry that through all of our brands, at least the full service operations. Anytime you have enough staff to be able to pull that off, it's a much better look. I think the client, they're kind of wowed when they see that, when you see a dish that you would typically think was going to be served in one of those dented, tarnished Schaefers that we've all become accustomed to over the last 100 years. The heating source from beneath that spring offers, along with, heating lamps and things like that, allow us to do some really versatile, appealing looking buffets. I think in the future, you're just going to continue to see that. And then for your probably select service operations, I think Linda mentioned earlier, the grab and go, I think is just going to be more and more popular. The cost on our end, and in some cases with packaging, is increased, but it's still a good look.
And Chris, from your point of view, how do you see stadiums and arenas changing and modernizing the buffets in the future?
Well, I mean, certainly I think we all thought the buffet was dead, when this first started. And I think now we're rethinking it and saying, no, it's not dead. Nick mentioned it's the most efficient way to serve the most amount of people in a short period of time, which again, in our environment is critical. because the intermission may be 15 minutes or the walk-in, half hour, whatever. And again, I think people will try the small plates. I think it'll just continue to evolve. I don't think anybody's found the perfect solution, but I also, talking to operators, have not heard a lot of pushback from the customer of saying, I'll never eat at a buffet again. Right now, I think as long as they see that you're taking the actions, that it is sanitary, that whether it's with the breath guards or the employee has gloves on or mask, whatever the local rules are that are accepted in that marketplace, I think you're going to find the customer is more than willing to go back to their old ways. It doesn't seem like there's going to be one solution for everybody. Is
it very much about keeping in touch with the customer then, the end user, to find out what they're comfortable with? Absolutely. I mean, believe me, again, in sports, they have this thing called the voice of the fan, which every league has it. And they ask them about everything. And if they had a lot of people say, boy, we're never going to go into a suite again because we had to serve our own food, or, we don't like self-service soft drink units, which starting to become a big trend right before COVID, and then it stopped, and now you're starting to see it back. If the fans react to that, the teams will definitely make the caterers change the operation. But I have not heard that that's happening anywhere. I mean, everybody went cashless, which that's a whole nother topic to discuss, but the customers do seem to think that that's a cleaner way to operate, that they're not handling cash. But it's also the caterers love it because they don't have any cash to count. As far as how that food actually gets to the plate of the customer, I think that's still a work in progress. And Nick, from your perspective, so working with brands across the world on their buffet design, what do you see the future as if you were to gaze into your crystal ball? Where's it all heading?
It's a very good question. And in my experience, there's no one size that fits all. And that kind of echoes what everyone's speaking to. I was at a recent international hotel conference where 1,500 attendees, there was 90 franchise groups there. And one key point that came up consistently, and this was echoed by the study, choice, customization, and flexibility continues to be demanded by the guests or the clients. So that echoes basically what we're talking about: choice, flexibility, and customization. So how can I have a different size of this look, or can I have a certain color? For our buffets, we have vessels and they want different colors. So we want a team color, or we want a brand color. So customization by also the brand and the guests is, I think, critical, and how we fit that. So to what Chris's point, it's still evolving. Safety, efficiency, menus have changed in a post-pandemic world. How can we execute that menu? Do we have the labor to execute that menu? So there's been a lot of hot topics from the labor piece, how we can execute that. Is it hosted? Is it not hosted? So I think it's definitely a work in progress. But I will say some of the brands have been coming to me lately from around the world and are saying, what sort of flexibility do you have in the space when it comes to a beverage cart, a coffee cart, a cooking cart? They're looking at that to activate that space. And then what Dean spoke about earlier, in various spaces, from the rooftop to the terrace to the pool. So there's battery technology now, where you could power an induction range for 4 hours, 5 hours, a heat lamp for 5 hours. So how can we create that guest experience? So I think the key is focusing on quality as best as possible. It's that fine balance of having sensitivity to the operators without sacrificing the quality and the guest experience.
So thanks very much, Linda, Chris, Dean, and Nick for taking part in this discussion. And thanks to Spring USA for supporting the session.